A new round of silver bonds offering higher returns for senior citizens. India launches a new mission to the moon. Hello and welcome to TVB News. Details are out today on the latest government bond sale for Hong Kong's senior citizens. This round of the silver bond program will see 5% guaranteed annual returns higher than the previous sale. A larger issuance size is also expected. The 3-year silver bond is poised to be issued amid high global inflation and a volatile investment environment. Under this current climate, the government said the bond sale could provide a stable, low-risk and attractive investment option for Hong Kong citizens aged 60 or above. The target issuance size of the 8th batch of silver bonds is set at 50 billion Hong Kong dollars. Depending on market sentiment, the government will consider increasing the issuance size to a maximum of $55 billion. Interest will be paid once every 6 months with a guaranteed minimum dividend payout at 5%, higher than last year's 4%. The bond will be offered at $10,000 per unit. Same as previous issuances, the dividend payout will be inflation protected. Simon Lee, an economist at the Chinese University of Hong Kong, said it's very unlikely the inflation rate will go beyond 5% in the coming 3 years. Some citizens said while most banks offer time deposit interest rates of more than 4%, they find it safer to place savings in a silver bond. After all, that's government-backed.
There will be no secondary market for silver bond. If needed, bondholders may sell their bonds to the government before maturity and receive their principal plus accrued interest. This demonstrates the silver bond is a safe and flexible investment option.
But applicants are reminded of possible extra fees incurred for early retrieval of principal. The 2-week subscription period will begin on July 28th. Applications could be made through designated banks and securities brokers. A tropical depression is now within 800 kilometers of Hong Kong and will intensify in the next few days. The observatory may issue the standby signal number 1 tomorrow morning.
According to the present forecast track, it will maintain some distance from Hong Kong today. Depending on the movement and development of the tropical depression, the observatory will consider issuing standby signal number 1 Saturday morning. Whether higher tropical cyclone warning signal will be issued depends on the proximity of the tropical cyclone to the Pearl River estuary and whether it will intensify significantly when it is edging close to the coast of Guangdong.
Overseas, India's space agency launched a rocket today that will attempt to land a spacecraft at the lunar South Pole. The Indian Space Research Organization's LVM-3 launch rocket blasted off from the country's main spaceport in the southern state of Andhra Pradesh, leaving behind a plume of smoke and fire. The Chandrayaan-3 mission is designed to deploy a lander and rover near the moon's south pole around August 23rd. It is expected to remain functional for 2 weeks, running a series of experiments. Only 3 other space agencies from the United States, the former Soviet Union, and China have touched down a lander on the moon's surface. None have landed near the lunar South Pole. ISRO's Chandrayaan-2 mission in 2020 successfully deployed an orbiter. However, its lander and rover were destroyed in a crash near where the Chandrayaan-3 will attempt a touchdown. Thailand's winner of the popular vote in May's general election, Peter Limjaroenrat, said he would not give up on his prime ministerial bid after losing in a parliamentary vote for the premiership. He was 51 votes shy of the required threshold.
I accepted that I couldn't reach 376. I got 324, and there's 200 abstains. I also accepted that it's below expectations in the sense that a lot of people didn't come to become quorum, as well as not voting as they wish, and I understand that there's a lot of pressure on them, as well as several incentives that didn't allow them to vote in alignment with the people. But I'm not giving up.
Nearly 1,000 supporters of the Liberal Move Forward Party gathered in a small park near the Parliament building as the voting played out. They jeered and booed loudly for each opposing vote. The Move Forward Party announced Friday a plan to curb the power of the military-appointed Senate after its members thwarted the party leader's bid to become prime minister. The 249-member Senate is seen as a constitutional safeguard to protect the interests of the generals and conservative government. There will be a second Senate vote July 19th. U.S. President Joe Biden wrapped up his diplomatic visit to Europe on Thursday by meeting with Nordic leaders in the Finnish capital Helsinki. There he reiterated Washington's support for NATO and expressed optimism that Ukraine is winning its conflict with Russia. Meanwhile, Russian President Vladimir Putin said his country will not extend the Black Sea grain deal with Ukraine, which expires next Monday, unless the West meets its demands. Daniel Rao reports.
US President Joe Biden traveled to Helsinki after what he deemed a successful NATO summit in Vilnius, Lithuania. In the Finnish capital, Biden held talks with the leaders of Finland, Sweden, Denmark, Iceland and Norway. Sweden is poised to be admitted as NATO's 32nd member country after it pledged more cooperation with Turkey on counter-terrorism efforts while backing Ankara's bid to join the European Union. Finland gained NATO membership earlier this year. During a news conference with Finnish President Sauli Niinisto, US President Joe Biden vowed to protect every inch of NATO territory, including Finland. He also expressed hope that Ukraine will make significant gains in its counteroffensive against Russia.
My hope is, and my expectation is, you'll see that Ukraine makes significant progress on their offensive and that it generates a negotiated settlement somewhere along the line.
Meanwhile, Russian President Vladimir Putin said his country will not extend the Black Sea grain deal with Ukraine, which expires next Monday, unless the West meets its demands. Putin added lifting Western sanctions on the Russian Agricultural Bank to allow it to use the SWIFT payment system was one of the Russian conditions. He said Moscow is also demanding the lifting of restrictions on shipping and insurance that hampered Russian agricultural exports. Turkey and the UN negotiated the breakthrough accord last summer to ease a global food crisis, along with a separate agreement with Russia to facilitate shipments of its food and fertilizer. The Kremlin, however, complains that the separate UN-Russia memorandum on facilitating shipments of Russian food and fertilizer still faces serious obstacles. Putin said more military aid for Ukraine won't change the situation on the battlefield. Dan Roll, TVB News.
Back locally, Director of the Liaison Office Zheng Yanxiong met with lawmakers in a luncheon today. Zheng said the Legislative Council has returned to the right track. Memo Sangai reports.
Director of the Liaison Office Zheng Yanxiong and Andrew Leung, President of LegCo, arrived together for the LegCo luncheon. As Zheng walked into the lunch venue, he was welcomed with a big round of applause. Many lawmakers also stood up to greet him and then shook their hands in return. Speaking in Cantonese, Zhang praised the work of the legislature, saying more bills have been passed than previously. Moreover, he is pleased to see LegCo has returned to the right track. Lawmaker Martin Liu believes Zhang is the first liaison office director to deliver a speech in Cantonese. Liu said Zhang has a good understanding of the SAR.
The biggest takeaway would be the several understanding that Mr. Cheng had shared with us. Basically it's concerned with the economic developments and the social welfare of the entire Hong Kong society.
Meanwhile, Roundtable lawmaker Michael Ting believes lawmakers should reflect constructive criticisms given by residents.
Constructive criticism, meaning criticisms together with suggested solution or alternative, is what Mr. Chang is referring to and what I think the central government is looking for from the Hong Kong legislature, because many of us represent the public. We know a lot more about what common citizens think on any daily controversial issue, much quicker and much more comprehensive than government. So it is our job to reflect those criticism.
Michael Tien also said people should not only focus on the city's national security issues, saying there are other problems to worry about, such as medical issues. Mimosa 9, TVB News.
Hong Kong recorded 13 million visitors in the first half of this year, which is still more than 60% lower than the number prior to the pandemic. This as Cathay Pacific began turning a profit, with expected earnings between $4 and $4.5 billion in the first 6 months of the year. Timothy Lee tells us more.
Having returned to normalcy, the city has swung its doors open once again to the outside world and has dropped all COVID-related restrictions. Despite having around 13 million tourists visiting the city in the first half of this year, the number is still more than 60% lower than that of 2019, when 35 million made their way to the SAR. Among this year's visitors, mainland tourists made up more than 10 million, while non-mainland visitors numbered 2.7 million, among which nearly 70% were short-distance travelers. An average of 71,000 people visited Hong Kong on a daily basis during this period. Lawmaker Yu Pak Leung from the tourism constituency noted that a major reason for tourism levels having yet to reach pre-pandemic levels is due to the current limited capabilities and supply of flights. Meanwhile, Cathay Pacific reported growths in both flight numbers and profit over the last several months. The airline recorded 1.5 million passengers just last month, which experienced a 9-fold increase year-on-year. Cargo carried by Cathay has increased by 24% between January and June. The company forecasted that it earned $4 to $4.5 billion in the first half of this year, and announced that it will issue a maximum of 6 weeks of monetary rewards to employees who bore the burden of the pandemic. Over the course of the COVID-19 pandemic, the government invested $19.5 billion into the airline to maintain operations of the city's flagship carrier, primarily through preferred stock. Cathay said that it will redeem the preferred shares depending on the market in the coming year. Timothy Lee, TVB News.
Still ahead, U.S. actors vote to go on strike, leading to possible delays for movies and TV series. Extreme weather hits many parts of the United States. Sighting of a whale in Hong Kong waters again. Welcome back. In the U.S., Hollywood actors went on strike at midnight after talks with studios broke down. Hollywood actors joined the film and television writers who have been on the picket line since May, deepening the disruption of scores of shows and movies. Tracy Furness has more.
Actors Union, the Screen Actors Guild American Federation of Television and Radio Artists, commonly known as SAG-AFTRA, formally announced its members will join industry writers who have been striking since May on the picket line Friday morning.
Earlier this morning, the SAG-AFTRA National Board convened following 4 weeks of negotiations with the Alliance of Motion Picture and Television Producers, the AMPTP. Because the AMPTP remains unwilling to offer a fair deal on key issues essential to protecting the livelihoods of working actors and performers, SAG-AFTRA's National Board unanimously voted to issue a strike order against the studios and streamers. Actors deserve a contract that reflects the changes that have taken place in the industry. Unfortunately, the current streaming model has undercut performers' residual income, and high inflation has further reduced our members' ability to make ends meet.
It's such a critical moment in the life of the industry, not just for actors, but for everybody else and all the waves of the industry that this will affect. I hope it's resolved as soon as possible.
If it's going to work at all, we have to be, part of it.
While international shoots can continue, in the US, stars will no longer be allowed to promote their work on red carpets or through personal appearances. No talks are planned and no end is in sight for the work stoppage. This is the first time both writers and actors guilds have walked off set since 1960. During that strike, then actor Ronald Reagan was SAG's leader. Tracy Furness, TVB News.
Extreme weather conditions have affected many parts of the U.S. More than a third of Americans were under extreme heat warnings on Thursday, while others have been hit by twisters. This report from NBC News.
Tonight, from coast to coast, Mother Nature's onslaught is unrelenting. Overnight, multiple tornadoes touching down around Chicago.
Here. Right there.
Oh my God.
Wreaking havoc at the O'Hare International Airport and leaving a trail of destruction with dozens of homes damaged.
All of a sudden, it was going all around. It was blowing all over. So there was like no way to go to protect yourself from it.
NBC's Maggie Vespa is there.
We're here in McCook, Illinois, where if you come into room 5, you can see the roof of this motel is completely gone. Here's that same shot from above. The owner says thankfully no one was inside when the storm came through.
Over the road.
And today, flash flooding in Mississippi, triggered by torrential rains. Multiple roads and buildings submerged.
My store is currently underwater.
This comes as more than 84 million Americans sweat through triple-digit temperatures, triggered in part by a deadly heat dome that only tightens its grip on the Southwest. In Texas today, the demand for electricity reaching its highest point ever. After 2021's rolling blackouts, there's fresh concern for that state's power grid. Miami now 33 consecutive days with a heat index over 100 degrees. And Sin City is scorching. Las Vegas poised to tie its all-time heat record, 117 degrees this weekend. On the Strip, even the pavement is dangerous.
It is super hot out here, and so like the bottom of my shoes, I'm worried that it's going to get stuck to the concrete and melt.
Nevada's only level 1 trauma center is reporting a troubling rise in severe burns from the superheated streets.
The pavement can heat up to 160 to 170 degrees, and all it takes is a couple of seconds of your skin being exposed to that to create a 2nd-degree burn.
73-year-old Air Force veteran Christopher Malcolm was waiting for the bus when he suddenly felt faint.
I was feeling overheated, and so I sat down on a sidewalk.
Unable to get up, the hot pavement seared through his pants, causing 3rd-degree burns, which required surgery.
I feel lucky to be alive.
Yet another casualty of the brutal summer heat that has the potential to be the deadliest yet.
Today marks the final day of the annual ASEAN Summit. Meanwhile, Chinese senior diplomat Wang Yi noted Hong Kong has the support to be part of the RCEP, or the Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership. That as Wang also met U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken. Sharon Tang has more.
On the final day of ASEAN Summit, Joko Widodo shook hands with different members who put on Indonesian traditional costumes. That includes Director of the Office of the Central Commission for Foreign Affairs, Wang Yi. Delivering his speech, Widodo said ASEAN must not be an arena for competition. He said it must not be a proxy for any country and international law must be respected consistently. When attending the ASEAN +3 foreign ministers meeting on Thursday, Wang also noted East Asian regions should strengthen cooperation. Wang also called for supporting Hong Kong's accession to RCEP as one of the first batch of members. He said China supports the construction of a stable regional production and supply chain system. Meanwhile, Wang Yi also met with Australia's Foreign Minister Penny Wong. Wang said China and Australia's relations have stabilized, improved and developed. Wang also said he hopes Australia will provide a fair, just and non-discriminatory business environment for Chinese enterprises. Both sides should also respect each other and cultivate a friendly atmosphere of mutual understanding. Wang also met U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken. Wang noted Blinken's visit to China last month has offered constructive opinions, and the next step is to carry out concrete actions. Blinken stressed the importance of maintaining peace and stability across the Taiwan Strait. Sharon Tang, TVB News.
Meanwhile, U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken called for stability in the Indo-Pacific region at the ASEAN Summit. Blinken said countries must uphold freedom of navigation in the South and East China Seas and maintain peace and stability across the Taiwan Strait. He also denounced Pyongyang's launch on Wednesday of its latest Hwasong-18 intercontinental ballistic missile. He urged the world to work together to end threatening behavior by North Korea. Blinken also touched on Myanmar's crisis, saying its ruling military must be pushed to stop violence and implement a peace plan it agreed with its Southeast Asian neighbors 2 years ago. Locally, a whale encounter again. The whale spotted in Sai Kung waters yesterday reappeared this morning, this time around Hai Island southeast of Sai Kung. Around 9 in the morning, the Bryce whale was seen poking its head above water and jaw dropped at least twice. This boatman who spotted the whale today said the whale seemed to have a whale of a time. But not everyone is as lucky, including Mr. Chung here, who took a boat trip trying to check out the whale. The whale was first sighted yesterday by 2 yacht club coaches. The Agriculture, Fisheries and Conservation Department and Hong Kong Ocean Park Conservation Foundation both tried to look for the whale, but to no avail. Both the Marine Department and Marine Police stepped up patrols in the area. Ocean Park's General Curator Philip Wong said the whale is likely not an adult. Veteran researcher Chung Di-hua said the whale wandered into cyclone waters while looking for food. And that's the news. Thank you for watching.